All right, sweet ride. All right, thank you everyone for joining another episode of Israel Unfiltered. I'm really excited about our guest today, who I just happened to bump into in Israel. But first, let me introduce him. His name is David Siegel, and he's the CEO of Meetup.com. You may not have heard of Meetup.com because you're living under a rock. But if you're watching this, I'm sure you've heard of Meetup.com. He's got over 20 years experience in technology, including he was the CEO of Investopedia, right? And I think the president of Seeking Alpha. So really cool bio, really great guy, fabulous personality. And I know this conversation is going to be balling. David, thanks for joining us.
Woo, pressure is on. Fabulous personality. The conversation be balling. Okay, we will do our best. And Seeking Alpha, when I was the president over there, was actually based in Israel. So it was amazing because I was running the US operations and I got to go to Israel every other month. And
That's awesome.
I was a lucky guy.
All right. And now you're in New York State.
Now I am in New York. Correct.
Sweet. Awesome. Okay. So a few things I have a lot of questions for you that I want to cover. But first I want to talk about is, what is it like to be just CEO of such a big organization or such a well-known organization?
Yeah. And there's a big difference between the two.
Right. There is a two. Yeah.
Yeah. So Meetup we have 60 million members. We have 250,000 different communities in 200 different countries. So we're very, very well known. But actually the number of employees at Meetup is only 90 employees. So that's not a large organization.
Correct.
I mean, Google just laid off 11,000 people, that's, 90 is just not even remotely a rounding error to what was just laid off from some of these companies. It is very meaningful is the word that I would use to be able to lead an organization specifically with a mission that's all about ending the loneliness epidemic. That is deeply meaningful. And the fact that it's so well known is wonderful. I walk around any country. I was in Dublin speaking at a conference, wearing my Meetup t-shirt. And someone stops me and said, "You changed my life." Well, I obviously did not change anything, but the number of people that have felt that Meetup had an enormous impact in changing their lives and helping them meet their friends, their business partners, it's deeply meaningful is the answer.
Terrific. Now, was that always the goal of Meetup, was to be able to end loneliness, or was it kind of like, hey, people just always want to do events, let's make a cool platform that makes it work for them, let's build a business and do good out of it? Or was it from the very beginning, or maybe let's say early on, was that kind of the goal?
Yeah, well, I think the founding story will help to answer that question. So I'll share the founding story, and then that'll probably answer exactly what the original goal was. Terrific. So the founding story was our founder, Scott Heiferman, a wonderful Jew and lover of Israel as well. He was in a state of shock, like frankly everyone else was after 9/11. He went down to the lobby of his apartment, and he met with someone, and he said, "Hey, what floor do you live on?" And the person lived on the exact same floor. And he's like, "You live on my floor. I've never met you before." And then another person also lived on the floor as well. And he's like, all these people I haven't met. And he kind of had this eureka moment. And he said, it shouldn't take tragedy to build community. My goal in life is going to be, how can I build community, not having to do with tragedy, but finding ways to connect people together so that they could bond around common interests. So really, actually, right from the get-go, it was about building adult friendships, which is, by the way, the number one most searched term, on Meetup, certainly during the pandemic, was finding adult friends and finding friends. And it was always about friendship, community, finding your people, and not having to rely on going to restaurants or bars or whatever it is to find your people. So really from the get-go, that was the case. Funny enough, what happened is that there is a major politician in the US. His name was Howard Dean. He was running for president back in 2004, very long time ago, almost 20 years ago, which is crazy. I'm sure some of the listeners remember him. He was famous for one thing. Do you remember what he was famous for, Yoel?
I want to say, I don't want to get it wrong. No, please tell me.
Okay, he's famous for the scream. He had the Howard Dean scream, whatever.
Oh, yeah. That's it. He was done after the.
He was done. Scream. The scream just ended his political career.
Yeah,
don't know what it was.
You can YouTube it. It didn't seem so bad. I didn't watch it live. I was too young then. 20 years. I'm 37, so I wasn't remotely involved. I learned about it when I was in college, and I was like, that was it. I was like, you just going like on stage, I forced excitement, kind of. It was in the sense,
yeah, I mean, people like Trump or maybe Biden could do 10 things worse than that before breakfast in the morning,
Right.
So anyway, at the end of every event that he had thousands of events, all around the country over the span of over a year, he would say, "Join my Meetup group." join Meetup because it's the best place to kind of connect with me. And he had thousands of Howard Dean support groups. And then another not well-known senatorial candidate in the state of Illinois, who also you would know, not for his scream, but because of his name, Barack Obama, also used Meetup and put us on the map. So we ended up growing oddly through political relationships.
That's interesting.
Which had nothing to do with the original community building, but it was about kind of politicians building communities around their campaigns. And we actually have nothing with any politicians today.
Would you say social media has kind of overtaken that for the political aspect?
Definitely, because we're talking about 2004 when social media was really nascent, possibly even non-existent. I don't know when Facebook even started, but probably around then. And we were the first social media. The difference was we were about using technology to get people off of technology. So people use Meetup to then meet up in person and get together in person. And we still do the same thing today. You know,
think about it. It's actually the opposite what you and I did, because I met you in person at a sales conference in Israel. And here we are now meeting up again virtually.
using in person to get together technology. I think we have a new future of Meetup here.
I think you got to do it. How do you find the people you meet in person and continue that conversation? But that's really just I guess with social medias, right? They yes, through social medias, and then you connect that way. I go to a lot of conferences, and so it's
why do you go to all these conferences?
I like learning. I love people. And I do sales for my I have a marketing company called Wadi Digital, and we're always trying to meet people in tech, and so I can help serve them. And I love it. If I could do it like full time, I would just do conversations like this, and I would go to conferences. I'm actually a little marketing tip. So next week there's Cyber Tech, which we're actually we're in the startup pavilion. We're one of like the minor sponsors, and I got and then Thursday's DLD. It's another tech event in Tel Aviv, and I'm actually getting on next Tuesday. I got a press pass. I'm going to have a guy follow me with a huge camera and a microphone. I'm just going to go up to all the booths and just interview all of them.
Okay, so to say you're a people person is putting it lightly, as
right. But I mean, also look, I'm a marketer at heart, right? And I understand how the human attention, how it's consumed. So I know when I go up to the booths and I speak to them, find out who the marketers, ask them questions about their cybersecurity company, I get all the information I need, and I send them the recording of them looking smart with all the good editing and everything. They'll post it on LinkedIn. It'll be on the featured. I'll probably be tagged, and then I'll know immediately if they're qualified. I already have their email, and then I can take that conversation.
Crazy smart. That's like another upmeet in person to go then digital.
Yeah. Imagine what we do for our clients. I mean, we don't do in person. We only do digital marketing, but we're like really cool out of the box things. Okay,
that's awesome.
When I met you, you spoke at the sales conference in Tel Aviv. It was a lot of fun.
Yes.
And you walked out and you were
my son was there. I was so lucky. It was great.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That also special. It is nice. Right. So you were there, and you were after that you were speaking. Okay. And then you had your book, and you were like, come outside and buy my book. And I'm like, I'm going to buy this man's book. And first off, your book is called Decide and Conquer. Why did you name it Decide and Conquer?
Because my wife told me to name it Decide and Conquer.
That's hilarious. I saw it on WhatsApp this morning. Someone sent me a screenshot from ChatGPT, and it was like, what's 2 + 7, 2 + 5? And it was like 7. And then he replied, my wife said 2 + 5 = 8. And it took 3 more replies. And then ChatGPT was like, we only have data up until 2021 or something. So it's possible that it's not updated, and your wife is right. It was 8.
I was always obsessed with decision-making and the biases that people have in making decisions. And I didn't have enough of a crazy life story experience to really write a book related to decision-making. And unfortunately, Meetup was owned by WeWork, and Adam Newman created so many crazy life experiences, and being part of WeWork was such an insane experience that the book kind of rolled off. 2 months I kind of wrote the whole thing. But the reason for the name is obviously a play off of divide and conquer, and the power of decision making, and that you are a result. Your life is a result of the literally thousands of tiny to significant decisions that you make every single day at all times. And that's kind of why it's called Decide and Conquer. There was an original name which we changed, actually. The original name for because I'm sure you're like waiting with bated breath to find out. The original name was I don't even know what bated breath is, but it's probably a good thing or bad thing. I'm not sure.
It's all right. I'm a numbers guy more than a grammar guy. So
there you go. So the original name was actually Luck is Hard Work, because I talked a lot about kind of
That's
how
true.
do you build luck within the book as well.
Awesome. And are you familiar with Scott Adams?
Yeah, sure.
So he's one of my favorite podcasters, and he talks about like creating luck and opportunity. It's like you got to go where the energy is, because he left like a small town. He was like, well, I want to do something in tech. He went to San Francisco, and then you got to go where the energy is. That's what's great about being in Israel, especially if you're interested in technology. Everyone knows each other. I mean, the opportunities here are phenomenal if you're able to break into the ecosystem and provide value. So you said a moment ago that, like, you know, a lot of the things, a lot of success, I might be putting the words in your mouth here, but it does end up coming from a lot of, let's say, a lot of decisions that you make, right? Are you ever ever to yourself say, okay, you make some decision and you're like, I bet, or I hope, or maybe I'm planting a seed here that this will lead to X, Y, or Z. Does that ever happen to you consciously in real time?
Uh, Dozens of times a week, consciously. Even you were talking about the book. So
Yeah, I'm talking in real life.
no, but I'll give you a real life example. So I decided to write a book, and people are like, why are you writing a book? It's not to make any money. If you don't make money on a book, you probably even lose money on books. It's not because like I'm looking to build some consulting firm or brand for myself, because I'm not looking to do that either.
I know the answer.
The
So
answer
you
is
can be invited on
optionality.
Israel Unfiltered.
Yes,
we can have this
that was
conversation.
it. That was it. But literally, I thought to myself, hey, I know that some lucky stuff, I have no idea what it's going to be, is going to happen. And because a book is going to create what optionality. It's going to create options for myself that I wouldn't have had if I didn't write the book. And look, I got to write the book, therefore it caused me to speak in a conference, therefore it caused me to be on Israel Unfiltered, therefore it caused me to who the heck knows what. But I constantly am actually thinking, take this meeting with someone. You never know what's going to happen.
Right.
Start a podcast myself, because I have a podcast as well. You never know what's
Right.
going to
So
happen.
you're putting good energy out there, but you're ever like, hey, I'm going to do a podcast, and it's kind of like my goal with this podcast, or I hope or think it will lead to X, Y, and Z. So
all the time.
Okay. So you coming on here, what are you hoping that will come of this?
In this particular instance, here's the answer. I love Israel. At some point, I want to spend half of my 6 months in Israel, 6 months in the States. I'll have at least one of our 3 kids. One of our kids just made Aliyah. So thank you. It's very exciting. And it could be that 2 or 3, all 3 of our kids end up making Aliyah, in which case we'll be in Israel all the time. And for me personally, I would say being able to continue to build relationships in Medinat Israel and is something that's of value, and whatever leads to can potentially lead to that is a beautiful thing.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I agree. Relationships are everything. If you want to know where you're going, build those relationships in those directions. All right. So in your book, you give a whole bunch of. I bought it. I don't know where it is. I was looking for it to bring on, and I couldn't find it.
There you
Might
go.
be. I looked at my bed.
I have your copy right here. I'll pass it over to you.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Right. Exactly. Okay. So one of your things that you discussed is be surprised only about being surprised. Can you explain this to me? I feel like, and I feel like this mostly comes with composure and human experience and being able to go through a lot of challenging times. Do you think it's something that's actually applicable just from reading in a book?
I think it's incredibly applicable, and it comes from experience. A lot of times when people start their careers or are early in life, something bad happens, whatever that bad thing is. And they're in a state of shock. They're like, I can't believe there were layoffs in this company. I can't believe that happened. How could that happen? I'm totally shocked. I'm totally surprised. If you're surprised, that should surprise you, meaning there's something wrong with having been surprised.
Right.
There are usually so many different tea leaves to read and body language to look at and financial information to review. In a case of, let's say, I'm giving an example of a layoff, that it should not have been surprised for all the layoffs that are happening and Microsoft and Amazon, etc. The next company that announced the layoffs, that should not be a surprise. So the way to kind of think about and lead your life is to avoid surprises, to avoid being surprised, and to avoid surprising others. So for example, my job as a CEO, simply put, never surprise my board, never surprise my employees, never surprise our leadership team. If I lead a life always thinking about how I can not surprise others, that's a great thing. And if I could figure out how to ideally never be surprised myself because I'm aware of what's going on, then that's also positive. So the statement of be surprised only about being surprised kind of gets to that.
Awesome. It reminded me of the only thing to fear is fear itself.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's got something to it. So it kind of I'm like doing this now, just like with my business coach. As the recession was coming in, we were like, we were just playing out different scenarios and where the business
Yes.
can go, what would certain clients, cutting budgets, what does it mean, da da da. So we played these out and what it would look like, almost like game theory in a sense, right? To kind of get a vibe of where you're going. If one wants to, let's say, I know some people that are, let's say, are very responsive, right? Let's say they're easily surprised, reactive, I think is a better word.
Yeah.
Uh, and I would say this is the default human condition. Unfortunately, I think it needs being overly emotional, overly reactive. If one wants to move away from that because they know it's unhealthy for them, it's taking up way too much real estate in their mind, what do you recommend for someone that wants to be able to be a little bit more, if that they hear bad news, like you would say, let's say they're not surprised, they weren't act a little bit crazy. Like what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I'll tell you what works for me, and people can decide if that could potentially work for them. So there's a famous quote by Derek Jeter. I'm sure other people have said it before him as well, but he's attributed to it, which is don't let the highs get you too high and the lows get you too low. So the reason why that's so important is because it's one thing to just say, don't let the lows get you too low. That sounds nice. But what I find actually for myself is that when this freaking awesome thing happens, I'm like, okay, good. Let's see what happens. I don't want to, and I'm an energetic guy, a very enthusiastic person, but I don't want to prescribe too much positive value to this exciting thing that just happened, because you know what? Sometimes blessings are curses and curses are blessings. You don't know if actually it's going to end up being bad for you, something good. And frankly, if something challenging happens, you don't know if that challenging thing actually could have been one of the best things that could happen to you on a personal level. So my psyche really has developed, shall we say, in certain ways, that when positive things happen, I'm like, let's see. When negative things happen, I'm like, you know what? Let's also see, because probably it could be a positive experience as well. That has helped me tremendously.
Interesting. But don't you feel like you might be missing out on some of the most, like, it's fun to be excited. It's fun to be positively surprised.
No,
Why isn't it, or do you just keep it to yourself? Like,
no,
like
I am.
why miss out on the highs? I know what you mean about, don't be too high and too low. And it's easy for Derek Jeter to say when he was in the Yankees in the 90s.
Sure. Exactly.
As a Phillies fan, we don't know what highs are. So, just lows. But the Eagles,
You had 1980 or something like that. So
1980,
79,
1983, 80, 83.
Hey, Mike
World
Schmidt.
Series and lost.
He was good.
Yep, 93 also World Series, but lost. And
Mitch Williams.
Yep, and this year too. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. So don't you feel like we should be focusing more on these highs in a sense? Like these are.
I think you should be high.
Like maybe not to your team. Okay.
No, I think you should have gratitude and happiness and
I should get high every day.
Appreciation. Yeah, go for it. It's legal now.
No, yeah, I'm just plugged in off camera.
Could we put that on Twitter, please?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that the ideal life is one that there's a deep enough sense of gratitude and internal happiness that you're in that kind of ideal state, which actually I try to lead towards, and that external experiences have ideally as minimal an impact on that kind of grateful gratitude and inner peace, inner happiness, and nothing can kind of either overly accentuate that or hurt that. That's the ideal scenario in my mind.
Awesome. Okay, of all of your rules that you gave in your book, which do you think aged the best?
Aged the best, meaning it will continue. I would say the rule around being kind versus being nice is probably one of the most important things for success in business and life, and to understand the difference between kindness and being nice. For example, it isn't nice to fire someone, make someone feel bad. It's not nice, but it could be the kindest thing you could do for someone if they're struggling, to actually let them go. It isn't nice to say to someone, hey, the project that you're working on right now, we need to end that project because it's just not important enough to the company. We need to prioritize things that are very important to the company, not something that's just important, to you or your career development. That's not so nice because they get upset. But it could be the kindest thing because that person's actually working on something that's actually going to get implemented. So I would say, you could say being a mensch or whatever, but I think the importance of being kind is underappreciated. it leads to being a more successful leader. And obviously the stereotype of most leaders is they're a bunch of assholes. I think that works for a very small percentage of leaders, but for most people, most leaders and CEOs will get fired if they are a consistent asshole and aren't able to kind of lead through kindness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that. When do you think it's hardest to be kind?
It's a great question. I would say it's hardest to be kind when you are in a bad place yourself. Mm-hmm. So if, for example, you knew you were I've been fired a couple of times in my career. Let's say you knew you were fired and you have to stay on in a job for 2 or 3 months. And that's just a very tough place to be. And you're not in a good place yourself. It's much harder to be kind to others if you're not taking care of yourself and you're not in a good place yourself. It's much easier to take out that aggression, frustration, et cetera, on others when that's the case. So I would say, just like the oxygen mask, you got to take care of yourself first. To be a more successful parent, you have to take care of yourself. To be a successful leader, you have to be doing all the right things, whether it's exercise, eating healthy, sleeping appropriately, to take care of yourself. If you're not doing that, if you're not kind to yourself, then you're not going to be able to be kind to others either.
Yeah, Dennis Prager said if you're in a bad mood, like 90% chance it was someone else's, they didn't have enough sleep. So therefore, you have to be kind to yourself in order for you to be kind, so other people would probably feel the betterness of you. Yes. So you answered a good question, a good answer to a good question. All right, let's go the opposite route.
What's a good question?
If you can change one of your rules now that you're like, I would have taken that out or replaced it or maybe updated it, what rule would you say isn't as relevant or you thought it were as pulling out your own book?
I am. I'm literally looking at like the list of the rules. Here, I got it right in front of me on page 23. You know why these are great questions, by the way? I've done like 70 podcasts, no joke, and neither of those 2 questions have been asked. So I'm like, I actually have to think. What is this? I have to think.
What questions do people usually? What questions what are the most common? Next question, I'll ask that. I'm curious, like what we usually ask, because I had Michael Gunoff on yesterday, and he goes, "You ask questions no one ever asked about."
These are great. I'm loving these questions.
They're more interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I'm looking at the list right now, and the one that I would say, here's the one that I would say that I don't actually agree with as much anymore a year later. So one of the principles around decision making is be long-term focused. And I actually have evolved my philosophy on that quite a bit, in that I actually think for many people, it's much more important to be short-term focused than long-term focused. Meaning there are so many people in this world that are highly ambitious and driven, and they're like, I'm just going to put another 3 years into investment banking and then I'll be happy. And then become a partner. I'm just going to put 5 years to be a partner and then I can retire. And, and they're miserable oftentimes because they're super long-term focused. And then by the time they finally, let's say retire at 50, they're miserable and like no one wants to be around them. And been divorced 2 times and the kid, they don't talk to their kids. So like there's a balance.
Did you have someone in mind when you just said that? Because it sounded like a very
like everyone that I know. No, I'm just kidding. I do know quite a few unhappy lawyers that can.
Yeah, that is a default. A lot of people go to study law and then they're like, "What the hell did I do?"
Don't be a lawyer. Don't be a lawyer.
I mean, it's also evil, but yeah.
No, it's fine. I just know a lot of unhappy lawyers. I know a lot of unhappy.
I mean, the work sucks.
Yeah, the reason why is because. And the reason ultimately why, like the root cause, is about like independence and the ability to manage your own personal time. When people can manage their own time, that's uplifting and that's energizing. When people have other people owning them and owning their time, and when you're a lawyer, your clients own your time, and that's the challenge. When people own your time, it's a big problem.
So I mean, my clients own my time. I don't find that to be a distraction. I feel like it's more the work that you do more than anything. If you love if you do what you love, which is what your shirt says in Hebrew, for those that can't read, then it doesn't matter really who owns your time. At the end of the day, you feel like you're doing one of the best things you can with your time.
Within reason. If your clients are calling you up at 1 o'clock in the morning and asking you,
I'd fire
3, doesn't work. Lawyers are working for they're working for, a $100 million client. And wherever that client says, contacts you at 9 o'clock, you got to get something done and you're staying up all night. That's what you're doing. You don't face that. Lawyers.
So let's bring it back to the short-term thing.
Sure.
So when you said focus long term, right? Did you have one thing in mind that's different? That's different from now than how you would define long term now, or are you just telling people they should focus more short term, like sacrificing in the short term isn't as worth it? Or where are you
No,
going with this
I
exactly?
guess what I'm going with it is to say, know yourself.
Okay.
Step one, know yourself. Know whether or not you tend to be more naturally inclined. So, Yoel, I'll ask you, are you more naturally inclined as a short-term person or long-term person? What's your natural inclination?
Long term, I've
Great.
always been.
Great. So what that means is that you want to over-index your time and making sure you're doing short-term things that'll give you happiness and joy, and you're not just kind of always planning for things that are, happening in the future.
Right. Okay. Do you hear background noise, by the way?
I do. Your kids. Yeah.
What the hell is going on?
They sound very excited about something. Maybe someone just gave them a bunch of like
Turn
lollipops
the
or
mic
something.
down. I have no idea. Yeah. Probably because I told them to don't go on the internet, don't stream anything now. Anyway,
Yeah, that's it. That's
that's
it.
my 6-year-old daughter.
You don't have the
speaking.
ultimate
You're sounding-
babysitter. Your Netflix.
Yeah, well, we actually, I have 11-year-old. She doesn't even have a phone, let alone a kosher phone. I'm very
Right.
anti-screen. As
My
I'm on
kids were the
screen
last kids to get
Uh-huh.
phones in their classes. And
Well, that's hard because when I tell people, when
Yeah.
I ask parents, I know we're totally going off topic. We're not necessarily off topic, but like I see the parents like, yeah, I don't want them to have WhatsApp, but they need it for their class. I was like, come on, all of their other friends, they're left out. Like, you're the parent, man. Send them to a different school, or why don't you speak to all the parents at the same time? The best friends with the three best friends. Say, let's downgrade our kids' phones to a kosher phone, so they're not on the internet.
Amen.
I don't know.
Amen.
I don't know. It's just a lot of people complaining about things, not doing anything about it. Yeah. So look, I'm long-term focused. And so you're saying in the short term, I should do things that I enjoy. That will lead me to the long-term goal. So therefore I'll get there.
And here's my belief. When people are oftentimes very successful, frankly, it's because they're in a good place and they're happy with their lot in life. And if they're happy with their lot in life, that attracts people to want to spend time with them, to be around them, gives them off positive energy. If someone is planning for the long term and doesn't have that positive energy, you do, obviously, but if someone doesn't have that, then all this planning for long term, great things aren't going to happen because they're not giving off that positive energy into the world. So if your head is in a great place, meaning you're focused on things in the short term to take care of yourself, exercising, getting to sleep at appropriate time, all that good stuff, then chances are that will result in lots of good things and long-term success in and of itself.
Right. Yeah, I see that. Yeah. So I do these little things on the way. I have long-term goals that I have. And among those ways, that's one of the reasons why I actually do this podcast, this YouTube series, is just so I can meet cool people. And I know eventually it will lead to opening other doors, meeting other people, being able to help other people. And on the way, I get to have the best conversations with the best people. So
and that's short-term fun. Short-term
exactly.
fun.
Right. And ideally I could do this all day, right? But in the end, it's got to lead to something, I guess. Okay.
But even if it leads to just short-term joy, that's good.
I agree.
That's an end in of itself, which is great. That's what I'm saying.
Excellent. Great. Are you guys a remote team? Meetup?
Yeah. So it evolved quite a bit during the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, 2019, actually, when the company was losing about $18 to $20 million a year, we were 95% New York based. So for example, we had like a 70-person customer service center, in New York, paying New York prices. Since the pandemic, over half of our hires have been remote, and we are now.
During the pandemic you hired remote?
Mm-hmm. During the pandemic, we hired much more remote. We're now 60% New York, 40% remote. And it's amazing because all those people who were remote always felt like the term redheaded stepchild. They felt like second-class citizens. Now all of our systems, everything else is extraordinarily remote friendly. And I'm loving it too, because we're only going to the office one day a week. And that one day a week that we go in is awesome. It's great for community. It's great for relationships, great for everything. And the 4 other days that we don't come in is great for work effectiveness and life happiness.
Terrific. Yeah. So we actually, we went remote during Corona. Obviously everyone had to. And then I started to hire like terrific talent because I went remote. I was able to find people, let's say, outside of the center of Israel. I found moms that just had babies that wanted to stay home and breastfeed. And so we stayed fully remote. And now the talent that we're able to attract and retain is unmatched. I mean, other other marketing agencies can't compete, and it's been terrific.
Terrific.
Yeah,
Huge
you
win for us
need to
too.
do
I mean, we're hiring people in
better
Nebraska and
vetting. You got to
Oklahoma
get better
and
vetting and hiring. That's what I learned. You have to know how to ask the right questions, but I find that to be great.
nice.
So
I'm glad
since
that's
you're
successful.
yes, me too. So right, meetup.com, people want to meet online. Great. We all know what it is. And if you don't, then catch up. You probably have your finger on the pulse on growing trends, probably in some extent.
Mhm.
What are people trying to get together and do? Tell us what inside information can you tell us about different trends?
Okay, sure. So trend number one is, and this is shocking, finding friends, which I referenced earlier, was not one of the top items that people look for in Meetup. It was always tech, hiking, other things. The number one item that search item on Meetup today is finding adult friends, and I think that became much more acute during the pandemic than at any other any other time. Before the pandemic, people would go to work and they'd see their friends all day and they'd hang out with them and they'd go out to work afterwards and they'd maybe go to a meetup event or another event
Right.
after work in the office. It was much different and much easier. Then when people are secluded, how do you find friends? And it's become such a more greater challenge than it ever has been. So greater trend around that. Outside of that, a number of people
Wait,
who
hold on. Wait, I
yeah,
have a question about that actually.
great.
And it's more, I guess, about product focused in
Yeah.
a sense. Like people are searching in Meetup, like find adult friends.
Yeah, literally that's the number one search term
And
on Meetup.
then like what comes up? Like Meetup, hey, come meet strangers, or like,
Oh my
or
gosh.
is it, or is it like, or is it, I mean, it also sounds slightly pornographic, but or is it like find adult friends who like frisbee? Or you know what I mean? Or I don't know, like
Yeah, yeah. So
kind of
when that comes up, we because our search has a lot of machine learning kind of algorithms in it, we know a lot of people's interests. So we have broad friend groups. Like for example, there's a group called the International Friends Network, and they're in like 10 different cities in every time zone. They operate 24/7, where it's on Zoom. Anyone could come on at any point in time. They want to see people. They feel introverted. They just need a human connection, and they come on to that. That's front and center, straight on Friends. Next level down is we have thousands of groups, I would say, that are specifically for introverts, helping introverts meet other people, getting out, doing things. Lots of groups for introverts, and that's great because Meetup has always been kind of serving people that's sometimes a little bit harder to find their people.
do introverts want to
So
necessarily
it's a
like
good
actually
question.
pursue this? I mean, like I'm a huge extrovert, and my wife is a huge
Right.
introvert.
Right.
And so
So
like
here's the answer.
yeah.
Introverts, obviously, as you know, get their energy from more solitary actions, whereas extroverts get their energy from, doing things like we're doing right now, talking and meeting people. We see a huge increase around January New Year's resolutions, specifically for introvert groups. What very many introverts feel is, hey, I'm introverted. My natural inclination is to stay home. I would like to change some things about myself. Some introverts don't, but many introverts will say, I would like to become more effective in terms of communicating with others. It's hard for me, but I want to make an effort to do so. So
Uh-huh.
many, I'm not going to say all, but many introverts, and your wife might not be one of them, actually will say, I would like to become better in this. How can I become better in this in a safer, more comfortable environment? If I go to a group with other introverts as well, that's a more comfortable place for me to be able to meet people.
Got it. Right. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes my energy is too much for my wife.
And then the
So
third
back.
level, and by the
Yeah.
way, the third level is just we know a lot of information. So if someone says finding adult friends, then on a search, there will also show up of like, we know you're into frisbee, the frisbee group, into whatever, backgammon, the
So
backgammon group, the chess group, whatever it is in your city.
awesome. Okay. So what are the trends coming up? Back to my original
Yeah.
question.
So
What are
another
people
big,
searching for? What are people doing more now than they were 3, 6, 12 months ago that they're looking for? What meetups do you see seeing exponential growth?
yeah. So the sport that is increasing dramatically across the globe. It went from like 100 meetup groups before the pandemic to over 1,000 meetup groups today. Is pickleball.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know if
just
it's hit
learned what that
Israel
was
yet.
this summer.
It's
Yeah,
a
and
phenomenon.
people are like
It's
all
a
about it.
phenomenon.
Why don't you tell
Everyone
people
is
what it
playing
is?
pickleball. Sure. So pickleball is a combination, they say, of three sports: tennis, ping pong, and chess. Ooh, meaning it's very strategic. The way the pickleball works is it's on a court about a third the size of a tennis court with a net. If people have ever played paddle tennis, it's a similar type sport, but you use not a pickleball, because what the heck's a pickleball, but use a giant wiffle ball and paddles, and instead of kind of a tennis racket and strings. And people are playing it. I just played it in LA last week, and we couldn't even get a court to wait for a long time. And then I just played it, again in New York, and it's just growing like crazy on Meetup and elsewhere.
Awesome. Well, can you share some other trends that maybe would reflect more on society, not just hobbies?
Yeah, sure. So one is just seeing certain cities where the number of events and the number of events related to kind of getting out and building relationships is kind of increasing on a significant basis. So for example, for some reason, I can't tell you why, but in the United States, the city that is the most extroverted, where people are wanting to go out and do things the most on a per capita basis, is Atlanta, Georgia. Very social place. And around the country, around the world, the number one most social city in the entire world, where people are just on a per capita basis wanting to go out and do things and build relationships, is actually Dublin, Ireland, which is, there's a lot of tech going on.
Is that because the weather's such shit and no one ever goes outside?
I couldn't tell you why. Atlanta, that's not the case. It's nice weather there.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of positive, actually, tech energy and young energy that's happening in Dublin, Ireland. If you haven't been there in a while, it's a really amazing place to go to. I've spoken at a few conferences there. So that's certainly another trend that is happening. Larger societal trend. Yeah, here's another one. This is so shocking, but believe it or not, board game groups are growing like crazy.
So why? Do you think board games, like maybe like during the lockdowns,
bingo,
they were playing online and then they were back in person or something? Or
I think people were playing, first of all, people couldn't go out. So a lot of families, our family, many other families I know, were playing board games at home. There were a lot of board games that are happening, and people just, it wasn't, if you wanted to do something besides watching, some technology and do something together, there's a lot of people playing board games. And after the pandemic, no one wants to play board games as much anymore, because now you could go out and do lots of things. So people are like, how do I get my board game fix? And there's literally thousands of board game groups that sprung up around the world. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, because it's a way for people to connect around a common passion, and board games is a great way to kind of meet other people in a comfortable setting.
Okay, so I love data. So similar question: do you see interesting correlations between different hobbies or interests? I can give a very easy example. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Here's two that we've seen. So here's one example, which is tech broadly. So we're actually seeing a fairly significant decrease in the number of tech groups and tech events that are happening. And there's a very interesting correlation or reason why that's occurring, which I could share, which is most Meetup tech events happen after work, when people are in the office and they want to go out after work and socialize, have some pizza and beer, and learn about some new technology that Microsoft or whoever's rolling out. Great. Or some data science thing, whatever it is. Because in many cities like New York, where it has back to a 40 to 50% occupancy rate, the number of people who are back in the office is much fewer. So therefore, that correlates to actually fewer people that are then able to even attend tech events. And therefore, people are creating fewer tech events. So we're seeing like outdoor events and sports and hobbies, like, wow, hobbies is up this year over year, like 40, 50%. And whereas tech is up by only like 5 to 10%. So we're seeing just very big differences in different categories, whereas hobbies and outdoors is way up, and kind of tech and business networking is actually much lower.
Yeah, that was my next question. Like business networking in general, things that are business related, those are
it's not down
relative,
but it's barely up.
Okay, but I mean, if Meetup is growing, whatever, but relative,
right? It's definitely much less than the others. Much less.
What's declined?
Tech had declined for some reason. Now January to January, it's up, but year over year, 2022 versus 2021, tech is definitely down for us. Business networking is also not as strong for us. And it's interesting that we're seeing a little bit of an evolution of, how often people use Meetup for professional reasons versus for personal reasons. I always believe that the best way to do something on Meetup for professional reasons is to do something for personal reasons. Meaning, you go on a Meetup hike with 30, 40 other people, you could find future clients, you could find people to hire, you could find, partners and businesses by going on an informal
I don't know
hike.
if you can hear me, but we lost you.
Oh no, really?
I'm going to wait a minute for you to come back. Yo, we lost you.
That's weird. I see myself.
Lovely. I think we're still recording. So we'll edit that part out. Yeah, your video has frozen several times actually for a second, like before. But
am I back now?
You are back. Your
Okay.
video's frozen, but yeah. Why don't you?
Video's still frozen.
Not anymore. No.
Oh, now it's okay. That was weird.
Yeah.
There's
So
something
maybe
going
you
on.
can go. It's okay. You can go back a couple sentences, and you can
Yeah.
you left off
Remind me.
on tech and business networking is down.
Yeah. So tech and business networking is down certainly relative to other areas. And I think it's an evolution in terms of how people use Meetup. I always say the best way to have a Meetup event that will broaden and advance your career is to go on something that's personally important. I'll tell you a very quick story, which is a friend of mine is a Meetup organizer. He has two groups. He has a bowling group and he has a business networking group. And he said, David, I have to tell you this. I've gotten my last 2 jobs from my bowling group.
Right.
And I met my best friend at the business networking group.
Right.
So
by the way, that's so fascinating. So I'm speaking from personal experience. The people I get close with are people that, not that I share hobbies or interests or values, even. There are people that are in the similar line of work, and then first, and then secondary, we happen to share those things. And then the opposite is true, is that you find people that you're close with on certain things, whether they can go to your synagogue or Boy Scouts, or I don't know, or some hobby or whatever it is, or some fundraiser. And then you're like, oh, we do things, we have this in common. Maybe I can leverage and help you in some other way. You know what I mean? And things like that. So sometimes, like, it's more authentic and natural. If you go to a networking event or a job fair, the probability of finding work through that is much smaller than going and doing things that a lot of people that you have in common, and then finding those 5-10% of people that are within your industry or niche and asking them what opportunities there are, and been like, oh, you also like Dungeons and Dragons? You know what I mean? Great. Like, oh yeah, and you're in marketing? Cool. Hey, maybe we have an opening. I don't have any other friends that like Dungeons and Dragons at my work, or I have a friend or whatever, right? That's hiring at his firm. So that's how it goes. Is that I think it's just human nature. I think they said 70% of jobs are filled by someone that they know, right? Like they reached out to someone or through their network. And so I think that's kind of how it goes, that you need to have, if you're trying to build any kind of connections, network in business, personal life, even if, let's say, you're trying to find a spouse, you're dating for marriage, then finding an anchor that isn't specifically directly on that, it kind of takes the pressure, the edge off, and there's another common denominator that brings the two of you closer, that creates greater opportunities and a sense of intimacy between two individuals or potentially friends or coworkers.
I love it. I mean, that's so great stuff. They say the best singles events are non-singles events.
Right.
And frankly, I have had 7 or 8 jobs in my career. I haven't applied to any of them. Like every single one of them was just some friendship, some person reaching out to me. And I'm not, that's an extreme, of course. But the 70% number, I absolutely believe. And it's funny you gave the example of Dungeons and Dragons. We have like thousands of Dungeons and Dragons groups actually on Meetup, and people go to them, and who knows what's going to happen when you have those kind of great relationships. A lot of tech people love Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm sure many people have gotten jobs, through their Dungeons and Dragons D&D friends.
You should write about that, specifically like 10 really cool stories that happen from like Meetup. People like 10 marriages that happen from Meetups with nothing to do with that, or you know what I mean, or how people like just. I think there's tremendous good. I'm speaking as a marketer for a minute. I think there's tremendously good content there for you to be able to help people make an impact and understand kind of just how, if you want to expand your network or your opportunities or the people that you meet or your friends, or any other ambitious goals that you have that might rely on other human beings, to understand how to properly do it, how other people did it, and that it's not what seems the most direct way so to speak?
Just if we could find a digital marketing expert who is based in Israel, who could help us to figure out a strategy. Maybe sometime you'll
I'll let
recommend
you,
someone.
if I have one, if I can think of one, maybe I'll let you know offline.
That'd be great.
Uh,
As long as they're
all right.
Yemenite, I'm in.
There you go. Now you're scaring people. And by the way, that's interesting because when I meet the rare person that has Yemenite roots in tech, it's just a natural connection because it's kind of like we were saying,
Instant hugging.
You have a different connection, all that, blah, 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 or someone from, let's say, Philadelphia, where I'm from, the same kind of thing. Lovely. Okay. So the final thing I kind of want to get a little bit of a vibe from you is that I want you to kind of, it's an open form question, nothing really specific. If you're an entrepreneur and you kind of want to sharpen your saw, you want to get better at what you're doing, right? What like in general, I know I asked you what you think was like the most aged well, one maybe that didn't age as well. But like, if there's like one or two generic advice that is not specific, not advice that you hear elsewhere, maybe from your experience in particular that you can share that you think can help people kind of like cut through opportunities, what would you recommend? I know we already went through a couple recent, like just now, but
yeah, I'll give you one related decisions and one not related decisions and go from there. So the one related decisions I would say is a famous quote by Teddy Roosevelt, which is the best decisions are great decisions. The next best decisions are bad decisions. And the worst decision is no decision. And I say, if you're an entrepreneur, the inclination to have perfect be the enemy of the good, the inclination to be worried about rolling out an MVP product that you could be potentially embarrassed by, the inclination to impress as many people as you can and therefore hold off on rolling something out is very, very high because of perfectionist tendencies by many people, especially entrepreneurs. And I would say to the entrepreneur, make sure you really like live the lean startup life, read the book, understand how critical it is to get direct feedback about your product as an entrepreneur. I teach entrepreneurship, by the way, at Columbia University, so I have a lot to say on the topic. And follow the build, measure, learn, which is you build it, then you measure it, then you learn about what you need to change, and then you iterate. And entrepreneurship is all about not the idea, it's all about execution and iteration and completely, sometimes upheaval and changing your entire product and business based on everything that you're learning in the market. So just get out there, make quick decisions, learn, fail, learn again, iterate, and keep going. That's one.
And what was the other? Yeah.
The other non-decision one, give me a second here. We'll get edit this part out. I had it to my tongue. Let me just try to remember it now. 1 second.
I'm not editing this out, by the way.
Oh man. The other entrepreneurship piece of I got it. I hope this doesn't sound too generic, but I just feel so passionate about it, so I'm gonna have to say it anyway. It's just the power of having multiple mentors and a personal board of directors as an entrepreneur is extraordinarily important. So many entrepreneurs don't understand that thousands of people have gone through what they're going through. They could learn from thousands of potential people, and having someone who on a regular basis, once a week, once a month, that you consider as a mentor, you consider as an advisor. I'm probably advising 10 different companies and entrepreneurs today. It's a win for the mentor and it's a win for the mentee. It's a wonderful way to kind of grow and learn from other people's experiences. And find yourself a mentor if you don't have one. Find yourself people who could be on your personal board of directors, and it will have a exponentially positive impact on your likelihood to succeed as an entrepreneur.
So pursue wisdom.
Yeah, let's do that.
It's a very Jewish value. Awesome. David, thank you so much for joining Israel Unfiltered. Where can people find you?
Sure. You can find me at meetup.com or download our app. And you can.
That's not you. You're not an app and you're not a website.
Yeah, but I'm about Meetup. I'm not about David
Fine.
Siegel.
Okay.
Who cares about me? I'm just like, whatever, the CEO.
You put the me in Meetup. Sure.
There's no me in Meetup. Yes, there's no I in WeWork. So find Meetup, download our app is what I would say. It's a great app, and if you want to like check out me, then the book is probably the best way. Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble if you're outside of Israel and there's a place to get Barnes and Noble, but or any kind of place where books are sold.
Book depository.
Yeah. There you go, book depository. We're over there, Decide and Conquer. So that's kind of the best way. And then in terms of I post a ton on LinkedIn, actually. So
there you go. Okay, got it. So you can follow him on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll have all this information down in the comments. David, dude, this was a delight. Take care, David.